It's Wellness Nerd Out time! What's going on, guys? Happy today and happy Wellness Nerd Out time, you guys. So today we're going to finish our discussion on the role intermittent fasting can play in improving brain health. And what we're going to talk about today, JMO, what's up, buddy? There he is. What we're going to talk about today is brain-derived neurotrophic factor production, how fasting promotes that, or BDNF production, we could say. There are some potential clinical implications for patients that have had a stroke, reducing brain damage from a stroke and mortality rates following a stroke, and how it could reduce the number of epileptic seizures potentially. Not to mention, could help improve cognitive functioning in Alzheimer's patients. So to start, let's start talking about BDNF. So what is BDNF? Well, brain derived, we get that, what that means. Neuro, we know nerves in the brain, right? And trophic, and the trophic factor, right? And trophic has the root origin that comes from food or nourishment in meaning. And so it's no surprise that in the book Genius Foods, for example, Max Lugavere, it's a good book if you want to check it out, he refers to brain-derived neurotrophic factor as fertilizer for the brain. It's like food for the brain. And so what does this food do? Well, BDNF has been shown to promote neurogenesis, or increase the number of neurons that are produced, new well-functioning neurons. Not to mention that if we're producing more neurons, well, that means, increasing our nervous function, right? Because our neurons are connected to form a nerve within the epineuron, right? And this means also we'll get new signals, new synaptic connections, right? The synapse is between two neurons, and if we have a bunch of new neurons being created and connected, we get new synaptic connections and pathways in the brain, as well as the bolstering of current synaptic connections. So what does this translate to in terms of an effect on the brain and what we would feel? All right, well, increased brain-derived neurotrophic factor has been associated with improved memory, with improved learning and overall cognitive functioning. Not to mention, increased BDNF has been associated with antidepressant qualities as well. So conversely, if we had a low amount of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, we would get things like memory loss, and things like, we're more likely to get things like dementia, right? And disrupted cognitive functioning overall, right? Decreased cognitive functioning. And so when we talk about intermittent fasting and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, well, yeah, it has been shown to increase levels of or amounts of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, but to what degree and how? Well, BDNF, there was a study done on mice that it had 40 mice on an alternate day fasting diet, and they measured their levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor production. All right, and this is from the National Institute of Aging in the United States is the study, and reference to The Science of Intermittent Fasting by Connor Thompson is the book, if you want to check out the source. So they didn't say exactly how long the mice fasted in the book, but there were 40 of them, and they did alternate day fasting, and they measured their levels of BDNF on fasted days, towards the latter end of the fasted days. And the BDNF increased up to 50% in these rodents, which is a good amount, and so, of course, as they would, this would be promoting neurogenesis and, improving memory, right? Well, they looked at the areas of their brain that are stimulated when, trying to remember something, and there were greater levels of activity in these areas of the brain associated with memory. All right. Now, as a general statistic, it has been shown that intermittent fasting for 16 to 18 hours can boost BDNF production by up to 100%. right? And if you were to intermittent fast for 36 hours, it could boost BDNF production by up to 400%, a whopping 400. So I think that's wild. I mean, that's a lot. Yet another benefit of intermittent fasting, and it's up to those percentages. It's not guaranteed that it will increase that much, right? But it should increase some. Now, when we talk about strokes and epilepsy, well, when we talk about a stroke, kind of what's going on here, what's the mechanism? So if you're not familiar with it, a stroke is a disruption of blood and hence oxygen and nutrients, therefore, right, to the brain, right? And this usually comes via the clogging of one of the branches of the internal carotid artery, with a clot, say, or it could be rupture of one of the blood vessels that has this deleterious effect, right, of not getting enough oxygen to the brain. And after a stroke, we can get brain damage and even death, So they measured the amount of brain damage following a stroke in animals that were on intermittent fasting diets, right? And it showed that those who fasted had less damage to the brain following a stroke and had lower rates of mortality. So maybe some potential implications here for us humans in the future, right, with intermittent fasting. We need a little bit more research, but it's definitely very exciting, all right? Now, when we talk about epilepsy, so what's going on here? Well, epilepsy is an electric conduction issue, right? A signaling issue, conductivity issue between neurons, right, and signaling in the brain. And so types of effects we get from this are, sensory disturbances, or things like loss of consciousness or convulsive seizures with epilepsy, right? Usually we think of those seizures, right? And interestingly, with epilepsy, there are a lower occurrence of seizures in general when the brain uses less glucose for energy, when there's less glucose in the system, or sugar or carbohydrates in the system. And so with intermittent fasting, well, it makes sense that in this way, indirectly, it could reduce the number of epileptic seizures because there's less glucose or carbs or sugar in the system, right? And so we don't get that neural hyperactivity as much, these electrical conductivity disturbances between neurons. Now, it's not exactly understood how intermittent fasting plays a role in mitigating the number of epileptic seizures, but again, definitely something to be considered in the future, and very exciting for the future of research into epilepsy and how the number of seizures may be reduced by something as simple as intermittent fasting, right? So really anything you would think that would reduce the amount of carbs your brain is using for energy would help, right? So intermittent fasting is just one of them. Now, lastly, we'll talk about Alzheimer's. And, we get decreased cognitive functioning and memory loss, right, over time with this neurodegenerative disease. And there was one study done, again, reference to the book, The Science of Intermittent Fasting by Connor Thompson, which I'm reading right now and enjoying very much. That's why I wanted to talk about this with you guys. It showed that 10 humans, 10 adults with early onset Alzheimer's, they fasted for 12 hours a night for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, they measured their improvements in cognitive functioning, if they would have any, right? And so even with just 12 hours of fasting a day for those 6 months, they had significant improvements, did 9 out of the 10 Alzheimer's patients in the study over the 6 months. So pretty powerful stuff there, I mean, it just goes to show you, if we're finding things like this, what else is intermittent fasting potentially good for, I mean, it's such a natural thing, right? And we always talk about how being natural first is best, and how you don't need to know anything about a diet, for example, to know that if you couldn't find it in nature, if you couldn't go pick it or kill it or extract it from an animal like eggs or milk, or drink it in nature like water, pretty much, or milk, right? Then you probably shouldn't be having it, right? And we also know that, using common sense, evolutionarily, how did people always eat in time of hunting and gathering, right? Way back when. Well, would they eat all day? No, they would go make a kill. They would go, pick things from the wild, and some point later in the day, they would probably eat a bunch of it at once. They're starving, and then until they made the next kill or they harvested some more food, they weren't eating again, And so it makes sense that our body's natural mechanisms will flourish when we cater to this type of diet and lifestyle, right? So pretty neat stuff, I think. Who do we got on here today? Let's say hi to the people. Mel, how you doing? BK Ham, the Majestic Goon, what's up? Danny Kiff, how you doing? Antoli, what's up, my brother? Thank you for hopping on. Hope you guys got something out of it. Thank you very much. We'll probably continue talking about intermittent fasting tomorrow in some other regard. I think that about sums it up for our discussion with intermittent fasting on brain health, but not sure when we'll see you, not sure where, but I'll see you there, my fine feathered friends. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.